Sue Jacques, thank you very much for joining me today at Rewind Yourself. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here as my guest, and welcome.
Thank you, Matt. I'm so excited about our conversation. I appreciate the invitation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Perhaps we can start just briefly, if you could introduce yourself to our audience who is watching, who you are, what you've been doing in the past, very briefly, and then we can kickstart with the questions I've sent across and go from there, really. So let it flow naturally and see where we go with the journey, with overall the story from your experience and from everything you will tell and share with us.
My name is Sue Jacques. I'm a Canadian speaker, writer, and former death investigator who I have recently retired in the past few years, and I'm now enjoying life. We've moved into a rural area in Canada, traveling and doing all the things that one loves to do, but I remain committed to my absolute desire to reverse rudeness, revive respect, and create courteous cultures in any way that I possibly can.
Okay, wonderful. Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. Maybe we can kickstart with an anchor question. And if you could go back in time and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would that be?
The piece of advice I would give to my younger self is not to hold any preconceived notions about how this journey is going to go, because there are ups and downs. It is amazing how my life has unfolded compared to how I thought it would unfold or how I predicted it might unfold. And now I've learned, because things are so unpredictable, to ride the journey, because it is absolutely a wonderful, wonderful experience to have my preconceived notions absolutely exceeded beyond my belief.
Hey, wonderful, wonderful. Can you shed some light about your childhood, where you grew up, what childhood was like for you? I always like to ask that question because I want our audience, especially the younger generation, to have a comparison of current times, how people are living now, how they lived back in the days, and what the differences are. Maybe you can shed some light, some stories, and how basically it shaped you as an individual and who you became eventually down the line in life.
I was born in Calgary, Canada, and raised here as well. And I had the privilege of having two simultaneous experiences. One was we had a home in the city, which is where I went to school and had my friends and did my sporting activities and other involvements. But secondly, my grandfather, before I was born, had built a tiny cabin in the Rocky Mountains just outside of Banff. And so on weekends, we would go to the mountains every single weekend, holidays, Christmas, Easter, all the vacations. And we had so much fun. I became free-range mountain kid. I think that's the best way to explain it. My friends and I and my brothers would go skiing, hiking, biking, all the things. We were outside all the time. Thankfully, back then, there were no devices to keep us otherwise occupied. And we had freedom. We could go anywhere we wanted to go. We were safe. Our parents would drop us off at the ski hill. We'd ski all day. And it was an exceptional childhood that I was lucky enough to have. We had tons of fun and laughter. And then I carried on after my initial education and went into nursing school, became a nurse. And from there, my journey just took all kinds of turns that led me to become a death investigator and ultimately a speaker, writer, and the person you're speaking to today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Was there a person that maybe, guided you or shaped you to be interested in the field from your career when you were an adult? Or how basically did your interest evolve or guided you into that direction where you are today, or what you've been doing in your entire career and life?
There's been a few things along the way. First of all, when I was a kid, I was about 9 years old. And this is going to sound a little bit unusual to most listeners. But when I was a kid, about 9 years old, my family went on a road trip to Disneyland in California. And from here, that's a multi-day trip. And it's funny, when we were in California visiting with some relatives that I had never met before, they put us kids in the living room and turned on the TV so they could go and socialize where they could have some privacy. And the TV was on, and I distinctly remember at 9 years old, the news being on. And on the news was a story about two youth who had been murdered. And I remember looking at the images, which I had never seen in my life, images of dead bodies that had been maimed. And that stuck with me to this day. That sparked a little bit of curiosity, which was not unearthed again until my later years. Also, when I was a kid in high school, my school went on a trip to Scotland, England, and Wales, and I was lucky enough to have saved enough money to go on this trip. That trip with my high school to the UK changed everything. It gave me a sense of wanderlust that I didn't know was inside of me, and it opened up my world to wonder what was out there, wonder what I could become, wonder what else I could explore. And also, finally, another thing that really affected me is when I was in high school, I took drama classes. And I remember feeling so comfortable on the stage. I so enjoyed that. It was more like improv, very casual, nothing formal at all. But I realized that I had a creative spirit inside of me. And I really, really enjoyed I felt very, very comfortable with a microphone in my hand or being on stage or even writing on the page. I had creativity inside of me that sadly I let lapse for a long time, but I reignited that creativity later in life.
Oh, wonderful. Very interesting. How did you find the harmony between being a death investigator, forensic death investigator, and then a speaker and talk about etiquettes and all these things? I mean, these are like two completely different worlds. One is horrific, one is wonderful. How did you combine this?
I call this my journey from corpses to Carpe Diem. After investigating over 5,000 deaths, seeing countless bodies, and being involved with the notification of countless people about the death of a loved one, and 18 years of doing that led me to become more philosophical about life and death. And I started feeling this tap on my door to my intuition. And my intuition was telling me that there was a deeper message that I could begin to explore and perhaps begin to share so that I could turn the mayhem, the disharmony, the horrible things that I had seen into a message about life. And so, in order to do that, I realized that the best way to meet people, to be able to share this message, was in the corporate environment. But I also realized that there was no way that a corporation was going to hire a death investigator to talk to them about corporate culture or professionalism or civility at work. So I realized I needed to get some street cred. And in order to do that, I went and became educated as a professional etiquette and protocol consultant. And that allowed me to open the door into the corporate world and begin speaking about ways that we can become more professional, more civil at work, and more respectful with our colleagues, families, and the community at large. So by opening that door, I was allowed to come in almost under the facade of professionalism, civility, and respect, and then inject some of these messages that I had learned along the way to hopefully help people realize that who we are and how we behave matters.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing this. What would you say how we can be more respectful in today's world with each other and towards each other? I mean, it's a very sensitive topic. I guess it's all down probably to your parents raising their kids in a good way. But obviously, as we grow and get older, we get exposed to many things in the world. And
Yeah.
today, on the internet and social media, is probably the fundamental space where, yeah, we absorb our knowledge, our world, and everything else. And the social media space can be great and fantastic and, uniting people around the world. But at the same time, it can be a horrible place. because people tease each other, laugh at each other. We sort of challenge each other, push each other buttons, and it's not always necessarily a safe and good place for people to be around. Back in the days, we used to socialize more outside, interact with people more. How do we, how do we, retain respect or learn to respect people, even in the online world as it is today? Because I mean, that's probably how we move around today in spaces rather than the real
Hmm.
world.
Hmm. Well, what you've just described is very true, and I feel that incivility isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's inherited. And these days we see that more and more. We see the influence of the outside world coming through a device that we have in our hand or in front of our face. And it gives us a false sense of courage when we don't have to be accountable face to face, eye to eye with a person or people we're communicating with or connecting with. We can say something horrible and just let it go and walk away. And I think it is absolutely important that we teach our kids, our grandkids, our community at large, how to respectfully correspond with one another, how to communicate with kindness. And I've felt for a while that it's an uphill battle, but I still believe that we can do it by demonstrating in our own communication, whether it's face to face or online or with our thumbs, that we are aware of the fact that what we send may cause someone else to feel hurt or disrespected or unheard. And so it's up to us to make sure. I can't change anybody else. All I can change is how I correspond, how I communicate, and how I connect with other people. And if somebody is communicating or connecting with me in a disharmonious or a disrespectful way, I can walk away. I can unfollow, I can block, I can turn off my phone. So we've created bit of a bit of a mess by continually getting sucked into the vortex of disrespect online. And I encourage people to take more time to have eye to eye conversations as opposed to thumb conversations. And that way, you can read the body language that a person is portraying as much as you can read the physical language that they're connecting with.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this. Appreciate it. Going back to your forensic death investigator career and experience, tell me more about London. How was your first day at work? How did you manage to build this so strong stomach in your career and life to deal with those probably difficult situations? And how did you manage to separate your professional work from your private life and still balance it out to be a human outside of work, but still do your work as best as you could? Could you shed some light maybe for people who are interested in that career or
Certainly.
in general want to find out from a person firsthand who worked in that space rather than from movies or Hollywood where they like to, yeah, make should probably deliver different message than it is in real life, probably.
It is incredibly different than what we see portrayed in the media. So I was born with a massive sense of curiosity. And I always wondered, I wonder what happens. So when I worked in emergency, I thought I had seen the worst of the worst. But then after I saw people die in emergency, come in with traumatic injuries or whatever had happened to them, illness, I wondered what happened. What would happen after they died? And coincidentally, I ran into a former classmate who was working at the medical examiner's office. This is way back. And she told me that there was a job opening, which never happened there, never. And so I took a chance and I thought, I wonder if I could ever qualify for such a position. And I did. But when you asked about my first day at work, it goes back to before my first day of work, because part of the interview process involved being taken to a death scene so that they could sort of see how one would react to a scene of mayhem or destruction or something that a person had never ever seen before. And the day that I was being interviewed, a death came in, and it was a suicide by gunshot. And so I was taken to the scene to see how I would manage it, and I was absolutely fascinated. I was fascinated not by the scene that was in front of me, but by the responsibility that was put upon the person and people investigating that scene to make sure that a true story of that person's life was gathered and told without judgment, because everybody deserves to have their story told equally and fairly and without judgment. And that part of it is really what captured me, to realize that I had an opportunity to learn not only about forensics and about the medical investigation of sudden and unexpected and violent death, but also to interview families to learn about their loved one, to explore medical records, to find out about a person's medical history, to notify a family of the death of a loved one with courtesy and with heart and with empathy. Those are skills that you cannot learn anywhere else but by being a forensic death investigator, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting to know. So I guess throughout your life and throughout your career, you've learned probably very quickly how to deal with difficult situations and challenges as well. Seeing so many drastic scenes, probably you're dealing with difficult times. What would you say, in your opinion, from your experience, would be a piece of advice you could pass on to younger people in particular to deal with challenges? Because I think your job probably equipped you with that experience and made you a strong person. And since we expose only or mostly online these days, as the younger generations interact more online with each other, they face challenges on different levels, whether it could be work experience, relationships, or anything else. Any tips you could give to someone in general they could apply and use across all areas in life?
Well, one thing that you touched on there, Matt, is I just want to make it clear that I became a death investigator long before sort of the world of death was cool. Before I would go to say a networking event, and people would say, what do you do? And I'd say, I'm a death investigator, and people would move away. They were so uncomfortable. They didn't want to talk about it. And after 18 years, throughout that time, I saw that change. And people would say, what do you do for a living? I'd say, I'm a death investigator, and they would lean in. People became very curious about death because it became something that was commonly seen on through media. When I think about my journey and how it could potentially help other people on theirs, I think about how I took chances. I took chances, and I didn't know if I would always succeed, but there's nothing like feeling the intuition knocking at your heart and saying, give it a go, give it a try. You need to take the chance, but before you take the chance or while you're taking the chance, you also need to be prepared to do whatever you can to be prepared, whether it's for an interview, whether it's for a networking event, whether it's for volunteering in your community so that you can make some connections. Don't walk in with an empty mind. Walk in prepared with questions, with curiosities, with the ability to communicate. One thing I encourage young people to do today is put on your phone, and I mentioned this before, but have face-to-face conversations. I'll give you an example. I was at a furniture store recently, and there was a young woman working at the reception desk when you walked in, and another more senior woman sort of standing by her shoulder. And the phone rang. And this young woman didn't know how to talk on the phone. It was so interesting that the senior associate who was helping her or training her had to explain to her, kind of in her ear, how to talk on the phone. We've become a society that talks with our fingers, not our mouths. And so to learn and practice making eye contact, going out and meeting strangers, putting yourself in experiences that may feel unfamiliar or may feel uncomfortable, and be able to be prepared to have a conversation so that you can take the chance that answers the intuition that is telling you to go for it.
That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing this. And what career advice would you give them? I mean, preparing, exposing yourself, trying, and getting doing these things will make you possibly stronger and more confident in many areas. But we also are being sort of pressurized by social media these days that we can become millionaires overnight. We have to be rich, and we have to have materialistic things. We have to be good looking, and this is what only counts today. But the reality is different. Some people have to grind really hard to become that person. Some people are not mentally strong enough to do this. But how can you what could you say to the younger people how to prepare themselves for the career, not to be influenced by negative people or negative sort of spaces out there, but also doing what they love doing? Should they have the confidence and should they risk? Should they take those challenges, or should they really go with the schooling system route and do everything in a traditional way and play it safe? What would you say is the best course of action?
You have to start somewhere. So start by listening to yourself. And I learned long ago that I was not like other people in that, there were these choices to take, and this was a path to get there, and that's where you had to become. That's still happening today. That's where we have to go to become something. And I think that we can listen to our mentors. It's important to have a mentor. And it's important for someone like me to have what I call a reverse mentor as well, so that I can learn from the younger generation about things that I may have lost touch with. So find yourself a mentor. Explore other options. Maybe volunteer somewhere so that you can see if that's what you'd like to do. Or once you get inside of an organization or a certain profession, maybe you learn early that it's not something that you really thought it was. But I can't tell you how many people I've met over my career who followed the traditional route, did what they thought they had to do to get where they thought they wanted to be, and they got there and they didn't enjoy it. And they feel like they wasted part of their life getting to that point. You're not wasting your life if you take a chance and give something a try. You're wasting your life if you don't turn that into an experience to take you to the next experience. So, whatever it is we try, we will learn from. It's never a mistake to give it a shot. But if you learn early and you listen to yourself, to the doubts that may come up or to the questions that might appear, listen to that, do some further exploration, take what you've learned and take it to your next experience. And sooner or later, you'll start finding where you belong. It is not a straight line. It is a circuitous journey, and it is amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing this. And what motivates you to keep going when things get tough in life? Is there something particular you have developed over the course of your life, and yeah, sort of strict and do it every day to keep you happy, motivated, and do things when it's raining outside, maybe you're tired, want to do certain things? Is there a trick you keep using and utilizing you would want to share with others?
Well, there's a few things I do. Fortunately, I'm blessed to be very positive minded. I have a lot of energy, and I'm very enthusiastic about life. And I also have the benefit of exploring and investigating thousands and thousands of sudden deaths. So one thing I do is I keep in mind the perspective that compared to death or illness or grief, this is nothing. Whatever the this is, I can deal with it. I can get over it. I give myself the benefit of time. I used to be really responsive and really reactive. Something happened, I would react. And now I take more time to allow myself to think things over and try to appreciate what I can do quietly and slowly if I have the time to react. The other thing I do is I journal. And I began journaling years and years and years ago. I never believed it was really something that would work, but for me it has. And I'm a very private person. So for me, journaling is more natural than talking to somebody about what's going on, other than my husband, who is incredibly supportive. And one of the other things I do is I get outside. And that helps me clear my mind, helps me think. I try not to wear my earbuds when I'm outside. I prefer to listen to nature and listen to almost downloading some of the answers that nature has to offer when we allow ourselves the benefit of fresh air and time.
Okay, that's wonderful advice. You mentioned death, comparing it. Is that something you would tell people from your experience, because you've been facing death on a daily basis in Korea, to look at the world and things differently? Because you're saying you're taking time now, you're not rushing things, you're not overly reacting to situations. How would you picture it in the best possible way and tell people, or you've experienced what death showed you in your career and how it changed you as a person? I mean, how could it translate it into daily activities, things maybe when they feel down or motivated, or they think the world is about to end and have difficult situations? Is there something you could translate from your career, or that particular thing you experienced and share with others? I don't really know how to explain about it. It would be really interesting. I'm curious to hear it myself. Um, how could we look at the world and things and situations in a different way, knowing what you know and what you've experienced?
What I've learned is multifold. I saw so many people die from disrespect, literally die from disrespect. Sometimes that disrespect was put upon them by others, and often that disrespect was put upon them by themselves. They just didn't take care of themselves, or didn't follow their hearts and did things that were inauthentic to their person. What I learned from being a death investigator is that we live in a time, thank goodness, where we can project how our life might unfold. And what being a death investigator taught me is that we can't always predict how our life is going to unfold. And again, I reiterate that the people's whose deaths I investigated were sudden, unexpected, and violent deaths. So these involved car accidents, um, murders, suicides, work related incidents. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But so many of the people died because they didn't pause and listen to their intuition telling them maybe they should say no. Say no to getting into the car after a few drinks. Say no to staying in a relationship that's disrespectful. Say no to going with their mates to do something that might be a little bit dangerous. Yes, we have to take chances, and yes, we have to enjoy life. And yes, there's something to be said for thrill seeking, but we also have to be mindful that our decisions have consequences. So in my life, what this has done for me to turn this into a positive has given me incredible gratitude. I have the honor of waking up every single day, and you know what? I can overcome anything. I've had things, as we all have, that have happened in my life, and if you take the time, if you talk to the people, if you write the problems in a journal, if you get the fresh air, you can put things back into perspective and realize that today is a gift. And today I'm going to choose to live this gift with enthusiasm, with gratitude, and with humility, realizing that tomorrow could turn out very differently.
Okay, that's a powerful message. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing this. And is there a piece of advice you received in your life that stuck with you and you follow it from someone else that helped you maybe?
I, there are two things that come to mind. The first is, and I don't know who told me this, but many years ago, somebody that said to me, quote, "You are unique, and you need to remember to follow your own path and not the path of others." And that was a very powerful message for me to hear, because I did feel a little different than other people. I didn't always want to follow the group think and do the things. I've been independent my whole life. And I'm kind of a lone wolf that way. And I'm so glad that whoever said that to me said it, because it empowered me to honor my independence. And so I did a lot of things on my own. When you talked about earlier experiences, that trip to the UK that I took in high school prompted me to explore my wanderlust. And I've traveled alone around the world. I've gone on trips by myself to amazing places because I heard the message that it's okay to be an individual and to do things differently. And the second thing that I would share, which I think is a very powerful message, is when someone said to me, "Don't raise your voice raise your standards. So when there is disharmony, I don't do well with disharmony. I like peace and calm. And when I hear that back and forth banter that might lead to disharmony, that's when I remember that message. Don't raise your voice, raise your standards. And that had a very, very meaningful impact on how I deal with disharmony.
How would you raise your standards? In what way would you say people should raise the standards?
I think part of it is to become consistent, to become known as a person who does what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it and does it to the best of their ability every single time. That's raising your own standards. What we tend to do is we lower our standards to meet other people. We go outside of our comfort zone. We don't do what we know we're capable of doing because we want to maybe lower our standards to do what everybody else is doing. And this is not an egotistical thing. This is something that you realize when you become consistent within your own standards, you will attract other like-minded people who also have high standards, and the conversations begin to change because you're among people with whom you can have philosophical, interesting, and meaningful conversations instead of talking about nothing with our
Yeah,
thumbs.
yeah. I think yeah, that's quite interesting. I think from my personal experiences, I've noticed that I narrowed down my circle of friends. So when I was younger, it was quite big, and it sort of shrunk over the years. And now I'm very
Yeah,
selective with
yeah, me
people I
too. I
speak
mean,
with. And I'm not trying to be selfish or try to put myself as a better person or above others. It's just for me, it's very difficult to interact or try to interact with people where I just don't find the same sort of balance of communication we can have. And especially now, I see a lot of people trying really hard to fit into, the world in the space. For example, on LinkedIn, the professional networking site,
mhm,
where
mhm.
on a daily basis you could see everyone is copying the same message and trying to deliver the same message, which is a little bit frustrating. We don't have any more those individuals who are bold and brave and speak out, and that's what I miss. So it's very hard now, I think, to find those circles or more
Yeah, and
interactions.
Matt, I've noticed that as well. I've noticed that as well over my life that over time, our tolerance lowers for certain behaviors. And relationships wax and wane, they change. Sometimes a good friendship lasts for decades, but that friendship has chapters. And sometimes we come to the end of a chapter, and other times we actually come to the end of the book. Sometimes relationships reach closure, and that's okay. The thing about it when that happens is to not, like when people ghost somebody, that is so cowardly. I believe that that is so unfair. If you're having a disconnect with somebody, why not talk about it? Why not, after years or decades of relationship, whether it's friendship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, if you're outgrowing the relationship, why not show the other person respect by sitting down with them or getting on the phone or somehow having a chat and saying, look, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable with where our relationship stands these days. I'm wondering if we could talk about it and maybe work things out, or maybe reach the conclusion that we've come to the end of this relationship and we can bid each other, good luck. Thank you. And who knows? I have had relationships that went away a long time ago that have come back because we all have to go and learn and experience and do different things. And sometimes that will bring us back together, but not always.
Yeah, I think that etiquette is slowly dying out. Being a gentleman, being a lady. I think it's easier for people just to ghost someone and just avoid that confrontation, that discussion, than having a sit down and talk about it. And I think it's more common because we don't interact as much face to face anymore as we used to. So it's easier to
Mm-hmm.
ghost someone. call them back, not message them back. Even like dating sites or dating apps, it comes all down. It's short. It doesn't mean anything. It's not lasting.
It's superficial. All that is superficial. If we want to get to know each other, we need to get to know each other's hearts. And so when we talk about back to the youth being prepared for their future, one of the things about being prepared is being confident. When you're prepared, you feel more confident. And when you're confident, you can take a deep breath when you enter a room or when you go to a fancy restaurant or when you go to a job interview, and you can take a sigh and walk in with your head held high because you have prepared yourself for that experience. So I take the word confident. Confident means you feel calm. So I've mixed the word calm with the word confident and come up with a word that I feel really, really captures the feeling of being prepared. And that word is confident, CALM, confident. So by being prepared, knowing how to hold a knife and fork, knowing how to enter a room, knowing how to dress appropriately for a dress code that's listed on an invitation, knowing how to RSVP. These are all basic business skills that, you don't have to go to a 5-star restaurant to be able to use a knife and fork properly. And as basic and old fashioned as that sounds, it matters because you never know in business when you're going to be invited to host a meal. You never know in business if you're going to be invited to speak in front of a group of people. You never know in business if you're going to be invited to take part in the hiring of people or in the letting go of people. You need to gather these skills more than 5 minutes before you need them. These are skills that you can acquire and you can build and that will give you that sense of confidence as you move throughout your career.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. So would you recommend someone to read the Knigge books and rules of etiquette, for example? I mean, it's very hard because I had a conversation with an astronaut some time ago, and he said prepared for extreme situation where there might be, a disaster. They might not come out alive from that situation, and how they prepare themselves is basically getting exposed to that situation over and over again until your brain literally is programmed to become calm in that situation and just try to act rationally. Do you think the schooling system could have an impact on this and we could change it and prepare people better for that life? Because everything is now digital. We're moving in that space, but I think for a very, very long time, I think the schooling system hasn't been updated and changed and prepared really people for the actual life, how to deal with finances, how to deal with emotions, relationships, confidence, how to speak up. We always, learn it down the line. And of course, as we age, we become more mature in things. But, I think these things could be thought much, much earlier. So people not shy away from situations or be more confident. Because now I think there's a disconnect because between the new generation and the older generations, because everyone said like, yeah, we could go outside, we could have played, no one tracked us, there was, everything was safe, we interacted more with people, and it sort of fades away with time. But also I see the younger generation being frustrated because when they join a company or job and they face difficult situation with the bosses, they don't know how to talk in that situation because they think they get paid for a job, they have to be obliged to all these things and listen and never talk back or never have that conversation or discussion because it's sort of like prohibited. And what do you think could change? Do you think it could change at all in those times we live in now, or is that already too late?
It's not too late. I don't believe it's too late. This all begins at home. And that you're right, times have changed. There was a time when people would gather for a meal every night after school and after work, and the family would get together and have a meal. That's where some of these skills begin. But the world is fast now, and so many families don't have the opportunity to sit. They're running to sports, they're running to after school activities, they're running to meetings. And so we're kind of all fending for ourselves out there sometimes. So yes, beginning at home is one thing if we can make it work. And we can make it work by displaying to our kids, our grandkids, the people around us, that we have the ability to converse, to clean up for dinner, and to eat in a way that is, let's say, a little bit more delicate than some people are eating. That doesn't matter. It's something that we can just demonstrate, just as an adult. Remember to demonstrate that, because once you're confident in doing it, it will become easy to do it as second nature. Schools, yes, schools could benefit by teaching these skills early. I'm so glad you mentioned the financial literacy, because that is so important. Things are changing, and it's important that we realize that we are responsible for gaining our own financial education. And as you said earlier, we all come into this thinking we're going to be gazillionaires in a year once we get our first job, and that's not how it works. We need to learn how to make these things happen. So the school systems, unfortunately, in my experience, have such limited budgets and so much to accomplish in a school year that it's very, very hard for them to add these skills and teachings into the curriculum on a daily basis. When I was working in the corporate world, I also focused on working with educational departments in the surrounding area where I am, because I felt that it was important. I was seeing leaders in the corporate world who didn't have these skills at all. They didn't learn them in school. So I made it my mission with my then business partner to try to get into the schools to teach the kids at an earlier age. And they gobbled it up. They loved it. The kids loved it, learning how to do these things, learning how to dine and connect and communicate and ask questions and listen, and how to speak to one another if there was disharmony. So it is doable. I have firsthand experience in that. It is doable. But without that, there are so many other ways that we can learn. There are videos online. There are blogs online. My book, What the Fork, is something I wrote. It's an unpretentious guide to formal dining for informal people. It's not about being uppity. It's just about being confident. And so many of these skills are easy to learn. So home, school, corporations, and being out and about socializing with people are ways that we can begin to learn these skills. And then also add, you can find anything online. You can learn how to do anything by watching a video and by practicing it yourself.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing those tips. Appreciate it. What would you say is the key to a successful and fulfilling life? Everyone has a different opinion, story, view. From your point of view and from your experience, what would you say it is and could be passed on to younger people? Maybe shifting the mindset, maybe dragging them into a different corner away from the social space where it's evil at times, and show them something different.
Well, I think walking into life with a sense of enthusiasm and wonder is a good place to begin. That allows you to look beyond this scope right in front of you and expand your horizons. Learn how other people live. Be curious about how other cultures live, how other professions work, how other schools educate. Be curious about those things. And take responsibility for your own growth. I hear a lot of people complaining about, well, they didn't do this for me, or I tried and they didn't do that. Take a look at yourself. Accept what has happened, turn it into a positive and a building block for how you can grow from something that happened that may be negative, and turn it into a positive. And over time, you will begin to develop a positive appreciation and a positive outlook about next steps. Nothing is forever. So whatever it is you try will just lead you to the next step in your journey. And I'm at the other end of a journey that's been amazing. My journey, I have a long way to go, but being at this end of a journey just helps me realize that there's so much more out there that I have no idea is going to happen. And yet I'm willing to experience it and to take what I've learned in the past, keep my mind open, be non judgmental about what may occur, and incorporate it into the rest of my life.
Wonderful. That's some great advice. What would you say? Maybe controversial question, but I think it's very important also for people to know, especially the younger people. What do you think people understood better about aging and getting older? Time flies. We always think, we have unlimited time until something really bad happens, whether it's health issues, someone dies, etc. But we think we have time to exercise. I don't know, to become a better version of ourselves. We have time to read a book. I don't want to, sound negative, but I want to people maybe understand it better. What would you say? It's very important to know about it.
Mhm.
Maybe push them to become that better version of themselves.
This is a very, very poignant question. And I'm glad you asked, Matt, because aging sneaks up on us. It's so interesting. And you can clearly see how someone's decisions when they were younger affects how they age when they're older. You can see it physically, you can see it mentally, you can see it in the relationships. I'm seeing this a lot right now because my mom is in a seniors lodge. And so I'm there a lot. And what I'm seeing is really opened my mind because I was used to dealing with people who had died, but I wasn't used to dealing with people who were aging and living in facilities where they needed help. And what I'm seeing is how many people are lonely. They've lost their partner or spouse, many of them. Their families may live far, far away or be really, really busy and not able to visit very often. They don't have the physical abilities to take part in some of the activities that are offered. So I see people who are almost beginning to just quietly fade away. And they love the phone call, and they love the visit, and they love the going out for dinner, and they love the family experiences. But those, from my observation, occur less and less and less with people who are our elders. And I think we owe them more respect. And I think any child would do very, very, very well by visiting seniors more often. I wish I had. I wish I had visited seniors more often because what I realized in retrospect is I saw seniors as old people. And now I see seniors as people with wisdom and experience and incredible stories to tell that we are unaware of because we just put them in a place and nobody goes and sees them. It's really been astonishing learning for me. And I'd like to share a story with you, if I may, Matt, about a gentleman that I met when I was a death investigator. A gentleman I call Norm to save his privacy. And this was many, many years ago. But Norm and his roommate lived in a tiny little, like a boarding house. And this boarding house was clearly on the wrong side of the tracks. And these two gentlemen had been used to living in even worse circumstances. And they found one another, and through the social connections that are available for people, they were granted the ability to live in this tiny, tiny little rooming house. Two single beds, a tiny little fridge, just a few things for them to live with, but it was the finest place they'd lived in for a very, very long time. And I was called there because Norm's roommate took his life. And as part of my job was to not only investigate, examine the body, investigate the circumstances around what had happened, but also to interview witnesses. And it was Norm who had walked in and found his roommate, so I needed to interview him. After arranging for the body to be moved and taking the physical evidence that I required, I sat down to chat with Norm. And I said, "I'm sorry for your loss, sir, but I need to ask you some questions about your roommate." And he answered the questions. And again, I said, I know this is very painful, and I'm sorry, sir, for your loss. And he began to weep. And I put my hand on his arm and I said, "I've clearly upset you, and I know this is very hard. Again, I'm sorry for your loss." And he said, "That's not why I'm weeping." He carried on and he said, "I'm weeping because you're the first person in years to call me sir. So I took a beat. I took a minute, as busy as I was, and I said, tell me more. And this gentleman went on to tell me that he had been a successful businessman, a family man. He had the house, the cars, the vacations. He had it all. But through some poor decision making that involved substance abuse, he lost the cars, he lost the house, he lost the job, he lost the family, and he ultimately lost the respect, not only from others, but the respect for himself. And he told me that me calling him sir lifted him up because people who used to admire him had put him in the sidelines. He was no good for anything. He wound up living under a bridge on the streets. And that story, when he told me that, I was absolutely astonished that I had made an assumption about this man that was so wrong. And I'm forever grateful that he shared that with me, because that story of Norm helped me look at our elders through different eyes, realizing that we don't know what people have been through. We have no idea what they have experienced, and that every single person deserves to be treated with respect and kindness.
Wow, that's very powerful. And yeah, I sort of have a similar story, or experienced similar story as well. So I can sort of relate to it. But yeah, very powerful. This is also the reason I want to, oh, I'm doing those interviews with people, because I really want to younger people to be more exposed to people from all walks of lives and experiences, and open them their eyes, and expose them to stories and experiences so they can understand better. Obviously, if I would have the resources, I would probably kickstart a initiative where I would take younger people to elders' homes and make them interact and spend time with them, because I think this would be really, really valuable for people. But yeah, maybe one day this could be achieved. But yeah, messages like these are very important that we share, because
I'll help you, Matt. I'll help you do it.
thank you very much. Any help is much appreciated. It's hard work, but I want to do it because it means well to me. So I think eventually one day maybe I will be able to do that for others as well. Yeah, great. All right, I've got two more questions. You mentioned about your book. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your book, what it is about, and also could you recommend a book that you've recently read or in your life that you also would
Yeah.
recommend others to read, and yes, spend some time maybe exploring it.
Well, as I mentioned a little while ago, I wanted to normalize etiquette and dining and confidence and preparation and how we present ourselves. So I called my book "What the Fork," and I just wanted to normalize things. This isn't about, like I said, this isn't about baby fingers up and being all proper and all that. It's just about basics of how to behave in a social circumstance. So that was fun for me. I wrote that quite some time ago, and it was a wonderful project. Again, that creativity I mentioned to you finally I was able to let that creativity come out onto the page. And that, by the way, led me to my writing. I wrote for a medical magazine for years. I wrote for other publications, and I loved it. I still love that. So again, taking a chance, taking a risk, led to a success, led to another chance. My favorite book of all time, I cannot tell you how many times I've read it. It's a book that you read daily, so it's almost like a daily meditation, and it is called The Book of Awakening. My favorite book of all time is a book called The Book of Awakening, and it's by an author, Mark Nepo, Nepo. I've read this book countless times because it's a day book. So you read it every morning, and I read it on my iPad, and I make notes, and I date the notes that I make when I enter them on my iPad. So every year when I get back to that day, I can see the changes over time. I'm sure I've read this book about 10 times. And every year I see how I've changed. What Mark Nepo wrote hasn't changed. I've changed. And it is so fascinating to see those changes that I captured in just a sentence, dated, and I can review every year when I come to that date in the calendar. So Mark Nepo is an author, a poet, and a life-changing person for me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I will definitely buy it. I've never heard of it. So maybe I'm going to be a changed person next year and we can talk about it again and see what difference it makes in my life.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to have a final question. A piece of wisdom you would want to pass on to the younger generation in particular, because this is all about what we're doing here. We're spending time to pass on the wisdom. You shared many great stories. You shared a lot of advice and anything in between. I think it's wonderful what you've said and how we talked about this evening. Well, it's evening in the UK. So, do you have a final word of wisdom you would want to share, apart from anything else you've already covered and mentioned during this interview?
There are, I call them the 5 T's. And these 5 T's are things I recommend for anybody, but particularly for our youth. And I think honoring these 5 T's, working on the 5 T's, will make a difference in people's lives. So no matter who you are, the first T is to be on time. We show respect for others when we are on time, when we do what we say we're going to do, be where we say we're going to be. And so punctuality is an important perspective when it comes to your professionalism and in your day-to-day life. So the first T is time. The second T is try. And I've said to you a few times about things that I tried. Heavens, if I hadn't tried running a marathon, I never would have run 5 or 4 marathons. You have to try. You have to listen to the intuition that's knocking on your intellect and let it in. Give it a shot. Try. Shoot for the stars. You never know where you'll land if you try something new, if you try something different, if you try something you've never tried before. So time, try. The third T is travel. Nothing will expand your horizons and your understanding of our humanity more than travel. And I highly recommend, if possible, that you do some traveling alone. If you travel alone, you need to figure things out. You need to figure it out if you're by yourself. Yes, you have to be careful, especially in today's world. But even if traveling alone means in your own city, in your own area, go on a day trip somewhere, eat alone in a restaurant, see what it's like. So time, try, travel. The fourth T is trust. Become a person who is trustworthy. Someone people can rely on. That will take you further than probably anything. If you can become the person who is reliable and being trustworthy. And that leads to the fifth T, which is truth. You need to be honest. You need to be truthful. If you don't know, ask. If you see something happening, say it. If you aren't sure and you need to figure some things out, ask people to give you the truth. A conversation my husband and I have had over 30 years of marriage often goes like this. Have I been doing anything lately that's driving you crazy? It's a question that invites the truth. And it's not about criticism. It's the truth. You never know. Somebody might be clicking their fingers weird and it's driving you nuts. Ask for the truth and you'll get it. So those are the 5 T's. Time, try, travel, trust, and truth. And I would like to leave people with my personal motto, which I have relied on throughout my career. And that is, when in doubt, choose kindness. If you don't know what to say, ask yourself, what's the kindest thing I could say in this moment? If you don't know what to do, think to yourself, how could I exhibit kindness in this moment? It will get you wherever you need to go if you're kind with yourself and if you share kindness with others.
Wow, that's a powerful statement at the end. Thank you very much for sharing this. Thank you very much for your time and the great stories and wisdom you shared throughout the interview. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Matt. Thank you for inviting me to join you. I've really appreciated